Why are the Georgia Bulldogs not winning more individual awards? Because it feels like it's snub season for the most part in Athens. I think we need to address that. I think we need to unpack why the cards are falling the way that they are. Because conventional wisdom would say, best team, made of the best players, a lot of awards coming for that best team. That's kind of how it works, right? Well, the Georgia Bulldogs beg to differ. One of the big reasons, in my opinion, why this is happening, public perception. A lot of people have this assumption. Well, the great players at Georgia, they're succeeding because of the other great players at Georgia. What sense does that make? It's not what the award's about. Is Stetson Bennett a less talented quarterback? Is he a less impactful quarterback because you're throwing to Brock Bowers? No, of course not. That just feels like a very lazy way to try and select these awards. And I think that's quite frankly why we're seeing so much of this snubbery happening. And not to knock TCU. TCU had a phenomenal season, did so many good things. But you saw Max Duggan win the Davey O'Brien. I'm not even going to say he didn't deserve it. I'm just saying I think the perception is, well, Max Duggan, he's doing it all by himself out there. Max Duggan's a great player, doesn't have that many great players around him. He's just doing it himself out there. At Georgia, it's Stetson Bennett's got a great offensive line. Those running backs have a great offensive line. Those receivers are benefiting because they're getting a lot of single. Like that's not really how we should do this whole thing. And I'm guilty of it as well, to be honest with you. That's definitely something that I think I get caught up in when I'm talking about the awards for these players. But the reality is, just because you have other great players around you doesn't mean that the great players should have their achievements cheapened or that they're not still impressive. We tracking? If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, we'd love to have you here. We've had a ton of the Georgia faithful join us here in the last week or so. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're at the party. If you haven't yet subscribed and joined us at this party, no time like the present. We'd love to have you here as portal season, recruiting season, and the college football playoffs crank up in a very big way. Follow me on the socials as well, at JD Piquel on Twitter and on Instagram. So here's the other reason why the Georgia Bulldogs are getting snubbed when it comes to awards season. The people who vote on these awards, I hate to break it to you, they look at stats. I know it's ugly. The truth right now is ugly, but that's kind of why I think we're having this conversation. And when you look at Georgia, they very much so play complementary football, and they share the load evenly from a production standpoint. Let's just look at the offense. Two of the top backs on your program, they're sharing the load evenly. There's not just one bell cow that's carrying the load 100% of the time and he's the guy racking up all the stats. No, you look at the numbers. Dejan Edwards, 127 carries, 681 yards, 7 touchdowns, a great stat line. Really impressive. Well, guess what? Kenny McIntosh has 10 more carries, similar numbers, 709 yards, 10 touchdowns. Together, that's a lot of production. Together, the Georgia run game, it's no secret, they're averaging over 200 yards on the ground. They are a force on the ground. So why are they not getting more awards? Well, because nobody has those gaudy numbers. Nobody's putting up the, 1,200 yards a season right now for Georgia. Nobody's sitting there with that stat line. And for that reason, the people who vote go down the list. They check who's leading rushers. Okay, great. That's what we're going to do. Name I recognize. Okay, great. We'll go that way. Georgia's sharing the workload. They're sharing the spotlight. Same thing when it comes to the receiving yardage. Brock Bowers, who won the Mackey Award, which if they didn't give to Brock Bowers, I guess we would just riot. But Brock Bowers, 52 receptions, 726 yards, 6 touchdowns. Unbelievable for a tight end. That's ridiculous. Ladd McConkey, second leading receiver. Well, guess what? He only has one less catch. 675 yards, one less touchdown, 5 touchdowns. Do you see where I'm going with this? When you share the spotlight, it means you have multiple people in the spotlight. And so when that happens, you don't always get the praise that maybe you would get if it's just one person in the spotlight. We tracking? Are we following what I'm saying here? It's a problem that's how they're voting. But that's how they're voting, folks. It's how they're voting. Caleb Williams for USC. He carried USC. And he deserves all the awards he's getting, in my humble opinion. I know there's some pushback on that, but I think he's deserved these awards, but he's in the spotlight, him and him alone. Most touchdowns scored for USC. He's rushed for 10 touchdowns, more than their running backs. He's carrying the load. That's how they do things at USC with him. If he's not on their team, they're not beating UCLA. Did they beat Notre Dame? Maybe, maybe not. Same thing for Max Duggan. He's carried TCU. Stetson Bennett, the optics of what he is as a walk-on, it took him a while to get there, surrounded by great players. Balanced offense, like Stetson Bennett is doing a ton for Georgia. But in the eyes of these people that look at stats and that are basing all of this on how much you're doing for your team, whether it's fair or not, Stetson Bennett does a lot for Georgia. That's why they're giving these awards to other people. Is it right? No. But here's the other thing. Doesn't matter long term. Because I promise you, this team, it just fuels the fire. Having guys get snubbed for awards just fuels the fire. It just does. They're just getting more and more motivation to go and do things as a team to bring home the trophy that actually matters when you have your banquet at the end of the year. Nobody's talking about the Heisman Trophy at your banquet. Nobody's saying, wow, we're so glad as a team we won the Heisman Trophy. No. You're saying, wow, back to back, that's incredible. Everybody in this room was a part of that, getting that here. So that's what they're hoping to do at Georgia. And you talk about the individual accolades. Guess who actually watches the tape? Guess who actually knows what players are doing what? NFL scouts. And I promise you, all these guys that are getting snubbed for awards, all these guys that aren't getting the accolades from the press and the media and the stat checkers, they're going to get a lot of zeros on their NFL contracts. Because the people that watch the tape, that know the game, that live and breathe it like you and I, that aren't just checking stats, those are the kind of people that are going to make sure those gentlemen get compensated properly, to put it kindly. So for Georgia, the snub season is here. It's unfortunate. I don't think it's right. But the reality is the main goal is still very much in front of them. And the snubbery, I think, will just fuel the fire for this program and gives them some bulletin board material. And I promise you, Kirby Smart will put it to good use. Excited to see how it all goes down. Big one on New Year's Eve, the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait for that game in Atlanta. Promise you, Dogs will be hungry. Appreciate you tuning in. Nick, Break, Lifting, Heavy, doing every single thing that you see here. This is your show. College football is a 12-month-a-year sport. We are privileged to be able to cover this sport 12 months a year on this program. So make sure you're locked in. Make sure you're subscribed. Like I said, college football playoff around the corner. Transfer portal season. The heat is turning up. Recruiting season. Heat is turning up. The Dogs in a race for the #1 class. Make sure you're locked in here. We got you covered. Also, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JD Pakel to do more interaction, have some more back and forth, and do more of what you want to see on this program. We're going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.